Hello, everybody. How you doing? My name's Curtis. I'm an addict and an alcoholic. So tonight we get to celebrate one of our very own, somebody who helped establish this ministry here, Celebrate Recovery. And I get the privilege of introducing him. I am just so grateful for this man in general. Not for all the work that he's put in over the years to make sure that everybody here has a safe place to go so that they can share what their experience is, so they can hear about strength and they can learn about hope. But because he is a dear friend of mine, that a few years ago I kind of went to him. I didn't have a sponsor at the time, and I didn't really know what to do. I had to find a sponsor. I just knew it. And I loved the way he shared in a group. And my inkling was like, I just need this guy in my life. Like, I want what he has. And so I need to do what he's done. In order for me to do what he's done, I need to learn directly from him. And so I went up and I said, hey, Vance, I was kind of like cowering a little bit. I was like, hey, would you please be my sponsor? And he was like, call me every day and we'll think about it, And I was like, what? Like, I thought you just said yes, but that was the deal. He's put in work over his recovery. And so he wanted to see if I was serious for him to take me on as a sponsee. And so I called him every day, and after a week, he was like, call me every day still, and we'll talk about it. And so that lasted for a while, and then he taught me this form of journaling that I was so thick-headed with, I just didn't know how to do it, He had a very specific set of instructions, and I did my best to change them every single time we met, But Vance, you don't understand this, But Vance, if only... And it came out, there was a reason behind everything that he did with me, because it was the way that he was trained inside of recovery. And that if I was going to get this method of recovery, the 12 steps of recovery, that I wasn't going to be able to do it by myself with my own will. And so he has been a big mentor to me. He continues to have what I want, so he's still my sponsor. And I just can't say enough good about him. So I'm so excited to introduce to everybody tonight the man of the hour, Vance.
Thanks, buddy. Got all this water in my eyes. I don't know what he's doing. I was at a meeting once a long time ago, and I was getting ready to share, and an old-timer put his hand on my shoulders and says, son, he says, if you get up there and start shaking, that ain't nerves. He says, that's God trying to shake some more truth out of you. So if you see me shaking, that's what God's trying to do. My name is Vance, and I'm an alcoholic who has struggled with pornography, sex addiction, and anger. Hey, guys. I was exposed to some terrible hurts that affected me as a young adult and ultimately led the way to my self-destructive path. The pain was unbearable as I dealt with the loss of my mom and uncle due to suicide. I also experienced the loss of 2 younger brothers. My mom attempted suicide many times and finally succeeded when I was just out of high school. After each attempt, she would promise she would never do it again, only to continue attempting suicide over and over. One last attempt, and she succeeded. She died from carbon monoxide poisoning. She was in the garage with the car running, and my bedroom was just behind the adjoining wall. The smell of the car exhaust woke me up. I could have died in my sleep had I not woken up. I remember waking up and being disoriented. I went looking for her and found her in the garage. She died in my arms. I can't put to words what that experience felt like. it was this tragedy that began a long road of me believing that any woman close to me could not be trusted, and they would eventually leave me. From this mindset came 2 divorces and many unstable relationships. I would always have a relationship before they could leave me. I would even get into another relationship before one ended to make sure I wasn't alone. I was on a train of self-destruction, and I'm not sure I even was aware of it. I didn't even know when I was using alcohol and porn to medicate my pain. The alcohol always helped me in justifying the need to look for another relationship so I wouldn't have to be alone. Lies and selfishness were a daily occurrence when it came to my personal life. I was good at keeping my personal life separate from my business life and became a successful businessman. However, my home life was a different story. I was drinking every day, hitting the strip clubs and every chance I had. I neglected my family, and not only in physical presence, but emotionally as well. I was making excuses for not being around while seeking out other ways to feed my selfishness and numb my hurt. I kept bouncing from relationship to relationship. I was living the cycle of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over, yet expecting a different result. And I learned, never support an experience which does not have God as its source and faith in God as its results. While in one of many unhealthy relationships, I sought help from an addictions counselor. I told him my relationship wasn't working. I had never been alone since my first marriage. The counselor suggested I quit drinking and see if it would make a difference. Well, apparently it did, because the girl that I was with me left saying I was no fun anymore and told me I should go back to drinking. This was the first time I had no other woman lined up, and my counselor still encouraged me not to go back to drinking. I couldn't believe what he said. This would mean I have no woman and no alcohol? I had never experienced this before. This is when I hit my bottom. No relationship, nothing to medicate with. I was miserable every day. My counselor suggested I go and give an AA meeting a try. At that point, I was willing to try anything to make the hurt go away. I had no idea what to expect at an AA meeting. I walked into the door, and there stood an old drinking buddy from years back. He said, "Hey, buddy, I've been expecting you. I saved you a seat." I was so relieved to not be alone. He became my sponsor from day one. Most people say their sponsor walked them through the steps. I actually feel like my sponsor carried me through the 12 steps. We went to meetings together every night for almost a year. We took meetings into halfway houses. All these meetings helped me learn about how mind-altering substances can control and destroy lives. My mom and uncle were examples of this very thing. For many years, I neglected my family due to my addictions. Even during the beginning of my recovery, I still did not put my family first. I learned that I needed to be in meetings every night, which meant I was not available to my children often. When I came to understand was that everything I put before my recovery, I stood to lose. My recovery had to come first. If I wasn't sober, then I could lose my kids, my business, my life. That was a path that I was not willing to go. I did what I had to do to get and keep my sobriety. Once I was sober and my emotional healing was in progress, that's where I began to see the fruits of all the hard work. Relationships with my sons began their healing process. It wasn't easy or fast, but worth every hour I gave to my recovery. worth every tear I shed, worth all I had given up to now be on the road of reconciliation with him. God's shaking the heck out of me up here. I want you to know that. I've been in recovery for 19 years and just recently had a conversation with one of my sons that was very healing. He shared with me that during my addiction and recovery process, we had a lot of lost time. I was so proud of him of being able to share with me how he felt. He took a big risk by sharing his heart with me. Prior to my recovery, I would have been defensive, probably making some excuses for what I did and didn't do. Instead, I was able to listen and receive what he was saying. In my own head, I had already knew what he was saying was true. But it was a chance for me to validate that he was validate his feelings. I am now taking some steps to change the loss of time to time well spent together. This is how recovery works in my life. I do the hard work, and then I get to reap the blessings. I made lots of friends at meetings in my recovery journey. When I am in self-pity, they tell me to get my head out of my you-know-what. They still take no crap from me. I truly benefit from those. Of those that love me enough to tell me what I need to hear rather than what I want to hear. I have come to realize that this is an I problem and a we solution. If you haven't noticed yet, all these steps begin with the word we, not I. You hear the phrase a lot that says, don't do this life alone. I encourage you to not to do your recovery alone. It's not designed to work that way. I was helping a friend out one weekend and was in a bad place. I told him I was hurting so bad that I had to go home. My friend had the same medical doctor as me and suggested maybe he'd give him a call. I was able to reach the doctor and tell my circumstances and ask if there was anything he could do. He was aware of my alcohol problem, but what I didn't know was that he was a recovering alcoholic. Is that a God thing or what? He said, I know what you're going through. I'm a recovering alcoholic also. I do not recommend you take any meds at this time. Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. He said, if I thought you were in any danger, I would subscribe you something. But what you need to do is suck it up. Needless to say, I was pissed. He said, here's what I'll do for you. I'll give you a script, and you can decide if you need to take it. I am happy to say his way of handling that situation so life-changing to me. He gave me the power to choose. And I chose not to fill the script. I was able to survive that painful time in my life without medication. Clarity of mind was something I surely needed to continue on my journey. I started doing some counseling because even though I was sober, something was still missing in one of my sessions. The counselor was asking me about what I thought about God. I was sitting there with my eyes closed and said, I know God has my back. He said, I know God has my back. He said, well, why don't you turn around and see him? In that moment, everything changed. I knew that God was with me. I came to believe in that moment that God was now beside me, and that I could do the rest of my life with him by his side. He was the missing piece of my recovery. I do believe that without him facing all the pain and suffering I have caused and received, there would be a high chance of relapse waiting for me. I am so grateful that in my lowest of lows, I am never alone. He loves me despite that I have done what I have done. God loved me enough to send his son to die for me, though I hurt others in my sinful behavior. He sees the worth in me when I can't see or feel it. I know that to be true because he says so in the Bible. In Romans 5:8, he says God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. I also began attending a prayer group. This helped me navigate the pain of my mom's suicide. I was really angry at God for taking my mom. During one of my prayer times, I actually heard the voice of God. However, there's no doubt in my mind that God himself, during one of the prayer times, I didn't actually hear the voice of God. However, there's no doubt in my mind that God himself helped me understand that he was not to take my mother from me. He let her go. She was in so much pain and could no longer do it on her own. I came to a place of understanding that God was always next to her, but she never would reach out. This had a huge impact on me. Not only did it help with my misplaced anger towards God, it also made me realize that I had a part in my relationship with him. My relationship with him is not one-sided. I need to reach out to him. Shortly after that, I joined an adult child group ran by addictions counselor. In this group, I learned to journal on my character defects every day. The journaling taught me how to ask God what to do about my negative behaviors. I learned that I really wasn't aware of some of the things I did through all my day. I needed to spend the time going through the process of taking a daily moral inventory each night, followed by journaling about them. Doing this practice daily for several years has helped me become aware of these behaviors. Most times I'm able to spot them more quickly and choose another path. I learned that I am not aware of, I cannot change. I believe as I work my program and reach out to God, I grow in my discernment with him. He has a way of directing me when I have a choice to make. This is an example of how God confirmed to me that I really knew but was struggling to do. I started my business in '82, just me and a 1969 old Chevy van. The business was my baby that I had nurtured for 40 years. A few years back, I began to feel the pull to retire. My mind was flooded with thoughts like, who am I if I am not a business owner? What will I do to fill that void? How do I pass on my business to my family, but not to be in control of it? How do I ultimately let go? What came to realize that I had allowed my identity to become all about who I was in my business. So really the question was struggling with who am I? My desire was to leave the business to my sons, but was struggling to let it go. My mother-in-law is blessed with discernment from God and was a messenger of a gift that helped me to get a place of knowing that the business was loaned to me, but belonged to God. She was shopping one day and soon a portrait of Jesus hanging on the wall. It's a large picture, beautiful. The picture depicts a man reaching out his hand to another, handing out the business over to another man. Alongside the business owner is Jesus. As the owner puts his hand out to turn over the business, Jesus extends his hand out to introduce himself as the real owner of the company. When my mother-in-law gave me the picture, my emotions were overwhelmed. I knew right then and there that this was confirmation to God that it was time to turn the business over. The business was always his. He just let me run it. It wasn't easy, however. I knew it was time to turn it over, and yet had all these unanswered questions about my identity. I am very grateful that God provided me with big understanding as I exited one responsibility and then to go into another. I am currently finishing up the build of our new home. Creating something for our family has helped redefine my purpose. This is a project that me and my wife have worked together on. It has allowed us to spend a time together, dreaming and planning our future. This has kept me occupied with plenty of projects to do. Also, it gives me time to reflect on my program. Sometimes I get a project focused and need to have a course correction to remember that my relationships need to come first before my projects. I am still working becoming better at this. When I get down on myself for needing regular reminders of this, I'm reminded of the phrase we use in recovery. It's all about the progress, not the perfection. Another area that I am continually trying to grow in is my emotional connection with my wife. I've tried to become more aware of my emotions and what triggers me in my responses to them. The way I have learned to improve in this area is by making phone calls to my sponsor, keeping him updated of what is happening in my life. Most times my distractions are things outside of my marriage. When I share with my sponsor my thoughts about how certain areas are going with my son in the business, he reminds me the things I am allowing to consume me were no longer mine to be concerned with. I keep forgetting that God is in control of the business and not just my son. This is something I have to focus on each time my thoughts drift to the company. I repeat, God is in control of me. My sponsor said if I will continue to focus on God being in control, I will eventually not be consumed by these thoughts. One of the best tools a sponsor gave me keeping control of what thinking about is called sustained thinking. There's a quote that says, "No problem can stand the assault of sustained thinking." This quote means that no matter how tough a program is, we can always solve it by thinking through it. I have personalized this quote for me. It now reads, "No matter how tough a problem is, I can always solve it by thinking it through, doing my part and turning the results over to God." This is a hard discipline for me, but one I work on consistently in my journey because change is inevitable, but personal growth, that's a choice. Even though I have 19 years of recovery, I still make mistakes and hurt others. There are a few things that can cause me to relapse in my unhealthy behaviors, and if left unattended, they could possibly lead me to a relapse in my sobriety. This is why after all the time in recovery, I keep coming back. I never want to get to a place of thinking that I alone have it all figured out. I've learned that in my pride speaking, and I know very well that pride comes right before my fall. I have a few triggers that can send me into a bad place. They're getting too tired and getting too hungry. I need to be proactive in this area and have to constantly be aware of my state of mind. My wife sometimes helps me by reminding me to have a snack or stop working in the yard so much. Since this is an honest program, I'll tell you something. I'm very thankful for the reminders, and sometimes not so much. Sometimes I feel like what she is really saying when she asks me to stop working and come inside, we don't spend enough time together. Or you always want to be out here working rather than with me. And you love the property more than me. When I allow those thoughts to enter in and swirl around, I begin to believe the lie that says, I'm not a good husband. I am a good husband. Just a husband who is working each day to do things a little bit better. However, in those moments when I hear that lie, I am tempting to react, but we all know that reacting never works out well for either of us, especially me. So now I practice being slow to respond. Most times I choose to take a step back, make a phone call, get help in deciding if this statement has truth to it. My accountability group will ask me, are you spending time with your wife? The type of time she needs is the amount of time you are spending outside the message that she is second best in your time spent on projects. If I am sending this message, then I probably do need to hear that reminder from her. In those instances, I have the opportunity to cause correct work on showing her in a practical way that she is my first priority. However, there are other times that she wants me to stop working because in the past I have overextended myself, become exhausted, and she can see the warning signs creeping in for me to crash if I don't take a step back, which is her helping me to do what I am not doing for myself, which is also known as self-care. God gave me a helpmate in her, and sometimes I forget that. We are both retired and learning to adjust to what our new norm looks like. Life has changed, and even though they are mostly great changes are sometimes can distract me from the most important things. My relationship with Christ, my recovery, my wife and family. Step 11 says, sought through prayer and medication to improve your conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. When I work step 11 and ask God for his knowledge, for his will for me, he has shown me my purpose. He asked me to stay involved in my recovery work, support groups. He also has me helping others by being willing to be a sponsor and taking others through the steps like my sponsor did for me. Through this program, I have found my relationship with God, which also means I found love, hope, forgiveness, and acceptance. When I started my recovery journey, my recovery was heading one way and my faith in another. Now I can say that I am on a path of recovery where the road narrows and my faith has become in alignment with God. Really is not how I understand him in the past. The way I continue to grow in my relationship with Christ is to discipline myself with God's word. I have heard it said that if I discipline myself with the word of God, then others won't have to. I'd like to close with a poem that reminds me to give every part of me to God. As a child, bring the broken toys with fears as children bring their broken toys with tears for us to mend. I brought my broken dreams to God because he was my friend. But then instead of leaving them for God to work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. I snatched my dreams back from God and cried, "How could you be so slow?" "My child," he said. "What could I do?" You just never would let go. I'm so grateful that recovery's taught me a new healthy way of letting go. Thanks for letting me share.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
Man, we got no water left.
All right. That is why it's called a legacy testimony. Vance, as you can see, has committed his life to continuing to get a little bit better every single day. And I loved that's what he said about how he can be so easily convinced of the lie that he's a bad husband. But the idea for him, and that I've learned from him, is that every day we have the opportunity when we are in Christ and when we are in recovery to do a little bit better. And that pursuit, it's that pursuit that means we don't ever give up. That means that we have the ability to move forward, and we don't have to stay inside of our sickness and our darkness, but we get to move forward in the hope of Jesus Christ so that we can be the person that God has designed us to be. And that is what I heard from Vance just now. We all have this opportunity. He showed us that through time and dedication, we do have the ability to move forward in God and in recovery. So for that, I am so thankful for you, Vance. Could we please honor him one more time? All right, now we are going to go into our closing. And so we here like to recognize that we always have an opportunity to give back, and there's a lot of us here tonight, and we are giving back in a very unique way through our presence here so that we can have a testimony like Vance had. So we can encourage people like Vance encourages people. We can give back in the way that Vance has shown us that he is able to give back. And so if you are able to please give, you have the ability to give online. You have the ability to give in person, and you can give as you're leaving. You can give at the desk, and we are going to have some people at the doors as we are leaving that you can give in person. Next is our recovery groups. We do have recovery groups every Monday night, and so our recovery groups are going to be, the men are going to be on my left, and that's men's chemical dependency and men's open share, and then on my right, your left, is going to be women's open share, and women's chemical dependency. And with that, if you are able to, please stand, and we are going to close out in the serenity prayer. And it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Get recovery.